the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to?
Welcome again to Street Talk. My name is Ammahad Shekarakki, and on Street Talk, what we try to do is we cover Michigan, the state of Michigan, U.S., and other countries. And we talk about political, social, and economics. Tonight, joining me again is Brother Dennis Burnside. How you doing, brother?
Good, Ammahad. How you doing?
And the other guest, Mr. Doug Warren. All right. All right. Let's get right into it. In Pennsylvania, it's possible that almost 1 million people will not have a chance to vote.
Yeah,
So,
it's due to these highly restrictive voting requirements. State issued identification cards, be it primarily a driver's license, but also state ID that requires people to be able to have the transportation and the cash and the wherewithal to be able to prove that they are who they say they are to get that required state ID to be able to vote now. Now, I've read over the weekend, I was in Chicago this weekend, and one of the local politicians there said the same type of requirements are going on in Illinois. This is, again, this is a Republican campaign that you're seeing duplicated all over the country. And it's a bald, ambitious effort to eliminate or to shave off a large percentage of the black vote. Now, in Chicago, one of the politicians there said that to meet the ID requirements that they have in the state of Illinois would make it impossible for 25% of the African American vote in Chicago to vote this fall. 25%. You're talking millions of people. I've heard estimates around the country that 40% of elderly, minority, and young voters would not be able to reach that mandate with required voter registration. Now, in Texas, for example, if you have an NRA card, that's fine.
yeah.
You can vote with that. But if you have a student ID, if you have a bill from your power company or your cable company, that's not good enough. We need you to spend money, spend time, come down to the Department of Motor Vehicles, which many DMVs across the country are consolidating, meaning they're closing down locations in the neighborhoods where the poor people live, the minorities live, the elderly people live, and they're moving them out to the suburbs, which makes it difficult for them to get to just from a logistical standpoint. And they're also eliminating many of them. So you have fewer and fewer DMVs, limited access to them, higher costs associated with it, and they're using that as a criteria for telling people whether or not they're registered U.S. citizens who can vote in this election. Now, Ahmad, let's be honest about this. This is an effort that has nothing to do with concerns about voter fraud. We talked last week about the fact that in the 8 years of the Bush administration, where they put attorney generals all over the country on the spot to investigate so-called voter fraud, that they couldn't find any. You found maybe 7, 8 cases in the entire 2 administrations of Bush's presidency. And you still don't have it. You just can't find people who walk into a booth and say, I'm him and I'm going to vote for him. It just doesn't happen. People have better things to do, like, I don't know, clip their toenails or watch The Simpsons or Family Guy cartoons. They just don't want to do that.
No.
What you do have, though, is electioneering, where you have people have their constitutional right to vote denied them by a conspiracy of powerful people who use all kind of nefarious tactics to prevent people from voting. This is just the latest in the long, well, relatively long history of this effort that we've seen in the 21st century since the election in 2000.
Now, Doug, it looks like we're going backward instead of going forward, man. I know back in the 60s, before 65, 11 states where blacks couldn't vote, and looked like something similar to the same thing is happening now. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I just, myself, I don't think that people are really realizing, except in small pockets, and especially in the minority communities, about what's really going on. You can see it here in Michigan. There's a systematic effort to make it more difficult for people, minorities, college students, people who normally would be more liberal in their voting patterns, more democratic. You're making it tougher for them to vote. Whether it be the war on drugs, where, not even the war on drugs in particular, but if somebody gets a felony, they can't vote anymore. As somebody who has a felony from 40 years ago, who has paid their debt to society and wants to, and has spent the last 40 years as a fully functional member of society, holding down a job, raising a family, they still can't vote. I see a real problem with that, where somebody makes a mistake, usually in their youth, and they're not able to have another chance to take part in the democracy in this country, and you see it all the time where they're making it more difficult. They're setting up laws, voter ID laws, to make it more difficult for people who maybe don't have a car. A lot of minority people in urban America don't have a car because it's too expensive. How many people in New York City have a car, percentage-wise, of people that live there? It's just as an example. And people are slowly starting to realize what is going on, and I can see something coming along where you have not only a new type of civil rights movement, but you have a new type of voting rights movement. And if young people especially feel that they're alienated from voting, there's going to be a blowback from that I think is going to be something that really kind of has been unforeseen in this country, maybe ever.
We talk about getting more people out to vote. Since Ronald Reagan was elected, we've been going down ever since then for the number of people voting every year. So, and we're getting more people eligible to vote. So what do you think is happening? What do you think is happening, Doug?
Well, I think as the years roll on, we realize what kind of a fascist corporate puppet Ronald Reagan actually was. I grew up, came of age in the 80s. You guys were a lot smarter than me back then. I was still just a kid. But, you look at the things that happened, everything that happened, especially economically, with this country today, with the deregulation, the corporate capitalism. It's not even capitalism anymore. It's more of a form of economic cannibalism where, survival of the fittest, and the rules don't apply to the people at the top of the food chain, and they're just devouring people's pensions, and they're stealing people's property with falsified paperwork like they do here in Ingham County. The work that Curtis Hertel Jr. is doing to expose that is really something that people should take notice of. It's just something that, as the Register of Deeds for Ingham County, he's doing something that maybe no other Register of Deeds in the United States is doing. He's fighting this at the ground level. But you have unfettered, uncontrolled fascist corporate takeover of the United States, and it really began under Ronald Reagan. I mean, Dennis and I, we talk about this all the time.
You've seen the real income of middle class and poor people stay flat or go down in the years since Reagan became president. As adjusted for inflation, middle class people and low economic people make less today than they did in 1980. For the first time since the New Age movement, I'm sorry, not the New Age movement, but the movement of Franklin Roosevelt, where he rolled government into the economy and invested in the economy and had public works and had social programs like Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs, or you've seen an investment by the central government into the economy, into the middle class. Mm-hmm. You saw an ever-increasing percentage of the pie being shared by the middle class and the poor. Every year their income went up as adjusted for inflation, and went up steadily all the way through the 50s, mm-hmm. all the way through the 60s, all the way through the 70s. And then in the 80s, it hit a brick wall. Now, with the New Deal program that Roosevelt's administration set up, he built the economy that was the envy of the world. You had a bustling middle class. You had a vibrant culture. You had music, art, architecture, engineering, our highway system, our entire infrastructure was something to be admired. I travel a little bit, and when I go to other countries, I come back to the United States and we look like a third world country. You know, I was in Europe last year, and you go there and you open up your computer and you're immediately connected to the internet. No charge, no fees that you have to pay. No one's trying to glom off money off you. You're just able to access yourself to the most important informational highway in the world now. Imagine what the impact is for children in that society, where they can get their questions answered quickly and affordably. We don't have that here, and we don't have that here by design. And so I think what you've seen, and it speaks to what Doug was talking about, is a collaboration by very belligerent and very greedy corporate elites with people in the government that they put in place to bend the rules and to change the rules and to take advantage of loopholes and skew the game to their advantage and forget everybody else. And that's where things are today. And so because of that, you see, you know, our infrastructure crumbles, our schools are pitiful, our bridges and highways are falling apart. We're looking more and more everywhere you go in this country, more and more like a third world country, particularly when you're in the communities, not behind the gates, but you're just in a community that used to be working class. Now it's a ghetto, it's a slum now. And what was a ghetto back in the day is now just obliterated. I mean, you go to Detroit now and nature's taking back some of those neighborhoods. So it's predictable. You can see it in the economic models. You have the free market voodoo economic advocates who came up with this scheme that, you know, when it first came out, even George H.W. Bush called it voodoo economics. It just didn't make sense. And then you have the people who believe in Keynesian economics. And you compare the two side by side, and there should be no debate as to which way we go forward now. But you have many of those people who are living within this free market, winner-take-all, wolf pack economic system that we live in now, who are brainwashed by Fox News, who are brainwashed by hate media on the right, you know, the Michael Medved's and the Sean Hannity's and the Rush Limbaugh's and, you know, the Ted Nugents. They listen to this and they think those guys are on their side.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't have more contempt for those people. They don't care that you're black and you're red, brown, or white. They care that you're not rich. And if you're not rich, you're not their constituency.
No.
They just use you to get the agenda across that they want to see come across.
But we see so many people out here who align themselves with this kind of media, and they seem to think that they mean something. They don't mean anything though. You know,
Well,
unless you got millions of dollars, you don't mean nothing to these people.
But they season the propaganda with delicious chunks of racism and misogyny and hatred. And people like that. It makes them feel good. They say, I'm miserable, and it's because of those ends over there. You know, they didn't even deserve that job. It's affirmative action that helped that guy get that engineering degree and that 3.8 average. I don't care what you do in this society. Some people will look at you, be you a female, be you a Native American, be you a Latino, be you a black, be you a white female. They're going to look at you with jaded eyes thinking that whatever you accomplished was accomplished with unfair advantages, not taking into account the centuries of white privilege that they've enjoyed, not taking into account that we're all God's children, and we all have intellectual capacities that exceed some and are less than others. But we all have the ability to learn, and we all have the ability to achieve. Well, some people's achievements are just discounted and thrown aside, and others in this society are feted. We see people like George W. Bush, who couldn't spell Bush without help, and he's selected, I should say, as President of the United States, and no one bats an eye. we look at his presidency from my side of the fence as illegitimate and certainly not one that would merit us looking at it with respect just based on how he got the job.
Right.
But no one ever said, not that I heard, no one ever said, let's go back and look at George W. Bush's admission papers. How did he get into Harvard Business School? How did this guy get into Harvard Business School?
Yeah.
How did he get into Yale? How did he get into this prep school that he went to? How did all this happen? And how did this man, who has apparently a room temperature IQ when you listen to him speak, how did he become president of the United States? No, what was the focus was of how he presided over his presidency and how he avoided Vietnam and some of the malfeasance we saw with the elections. But now we have Barack Obama, you know, he of the exotic name. He of the exotic parentage, a father from Africa, a mother from Kansas who raised him in Indonesia and Hawaii. Now we need to know what his transcript says. Now here's a man who was Harvard Law Review. I don't know if people realize how smart you have to be president of the Harvard Law Review, but that is a big brain right there. And you're talking about a man who is without question an intellectual giant. Irrespective of how you feel about his politics, because you and I have discussed that, how we disagree with many things he's done. But on the merits, the man is a brilliant man. But now, we have people say, well, let's look at his transcripts. How did he get into Harvard? How did this guy get into Harvard? How did this guy get into Harvard?
Look,
he got into Harvard with his brains.
There's no question why somebody like George Bush gets into anything. It's because he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Yep. He is one of the 1%. The whole entire Bush family is the 1%. And the reason he got into Harvard, the reason he didn't have to go to Vietnam, the reason that he was maybe the only oil man in the history of Texas who didn't make any money when he had an oil company, was because of his dad and his mother and the connections that they had, and the connections that were established long before by his parents and grandparents and great-grandparents with their connections to Wall Street. To compare him and to ignore that history, to ignore that silver spoon Kennebunkport cowboy history. The guy's a cowboy, but he's from Maine. I mean, I haven't figured that one out yet either. And he was afraid of horses, too. How can you be a cowboy and be afraid of horses? He spends all his time out in Texas moving brush all those years. And you ever seen him like Reagan? At least Reagan had the balls enough to get up on a horse and ride around. He like Bush, it's a joke. And the entire electoral system, as far as I'm concerned, is a joke. And I think people are really starting to realize now, especially over the last decade, that there's really not a whole lot of difference anymore between the Democratic and Republican parties on the main issues and the main focus of the federal budget. They're both pro-war parties, they're both pro-Wall Street, and they're both anti-Main Street. And you can go down the list of things that these two parties who are supposedly opposed to each other all these years have colluded on to screw the American people for the last 20 years, whether it be NAFTA or GATT or the National Defense Authorization Act or the Patriot Act. Those things are bipartisan. They were voted on bipartisanly, and the American people are suffering to this day because of it. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. The one of the things that irritates me now is that we see Republicans are taking over. I think I believe they took 9 states in this last election, 210. Anyway, it's 9 states now. What we're getting this, this you can't vote without this and you can't vote without that. And Florida, they passed theirs, and Pennsylvania, the man couldn't find anything to pass it, but he passed it anyway.
Well, again, there's no evidence. There never has been, nor will there ever be, any evidence of voter fraud. It just doesn't happen. You have tens of millions of votes casted every election season, and you don't have people walking up to the polls pretending that they are someone who they're not. Mm-hmm. Now, we do have a couple of notable exceptions. We have Romney, who lived in California and fraudulently voted in the Massachusetts election because he wanted to be governor of Massachusetts, and all evidence was that he wasn't eligible to be governor because he wasn't a citizen and he shouldn't have been able to vote. That's voter fraud. We saw it with the blonde commentator, what's her name, Doug? Tall blonde with the Adam's apple. She voted.
Ann Coulter, is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, Coulter. She voted in the wrong precinct, and she got caught because it wasn't convenient for her to go across the way and vote where she should have. Some people speculate that Alan West, the Uncle Tom Republican from Florida, voted in the wrong district because he wanted to run in the Tea Party district where he knew he'd be elected. So we do see it occasionally, but we don't see it in the areas where these Republican governors are coming out so aggressively and saying we need to come up with ways to limit the vote and make it difficult for people to vote because we're afraid of voter fraud. It's all about electioneering. That's what it comes down. Now I'm going to split hairs with my friend Doug over a little bit about the differences between Democrats and Republicans, because on the main, when you look at when you look at the Patriot Act, when you look at many of the initiatives passed by Bush, they were bipartisan, and you looked at the end results. But you had within the Democratic Party, you had the true Democrats like the Congressional Black Caucus, who came out against the Patriot Act, who came out against the Military Commissions Act, who wanted a true investigation of what happened on 9/11. You won't find that in the Republican Party. It just doesn't exist. You don't have that type of intellectual honesty within the Republican Party because they're all bought and sold. As many of the Democrats are bought and sold. You also have to acknowledge, and this might be too deep water for a lot of people who view this show, but you have to acknowledge the political intimidation that goes on in this country. We've had assassinations in this country. We've had people threatened with their lives in this country. If you go back and look at what John F. Kennedy advocated for shortly before he died, what Martin Luther King advocated for shortly before he died, Robert Kennedy shortly before he died, Malcolm X shortly before he died, you can go on down the list. You can see that they ran up against the true power of the military-industrial complex and what their objectives are. And when you unravel that big ball of yarn and you get down to the bottom line is they paid with their lives for daring to step up against these people and confront them. Fast forward to late 20th century and into the 21st century, you have a lot of people who would rather take the money than confront those people with what their true gut instinct, their visceral instinct tells them they ought to do, and that's vote based on integrity and what's right. They vote based on dollars. They vote based on doing what's expedient because they like to wake up tomorrow.
By the way, guys, I gotta let you know we got about 3.5 minutes left here. So.
Is that all?
Yep. Time flies when you're having fun, Ammahad.
I guess, man. I guess it really does. Let's talk about what do you think is going to happen, because if we get this many people not voting, 8 or 9,000 here, maybe 100,000 over here, and I mean, what do you think? What's going to happen in the election?
Who knows? On the merits, looking at the exit polling, which no longer is valid. We talked about that last week. But on the merits, if you look at the exit polling and from previous elections, and you look at the polling as we move forward through the summer, Obama should win. Obama should win by probably 7 to 8 points. But with the number of people being shaved off the election rolls and the way things are being set up by nefarious parties, who knows?
But, the reason I say this because we get Democrats. We get people keep saying, well, we're doing this, and we're doing this. But I was watching a program today. I was watching a program this evening, and the guy asked the question, says, suppose my old auntie in Philly who almost 80 years old, haven't had a driver license maybe 30 years. How is she going to be able to go here and get theirs and be able to vote?
She won't. She won't. That's the whole idea of this movement. She won't be able to vote.
She won't be able to vote. That's the goal.
Yeah.
They want to make as many people like your auntie, or like a kid who's going to college who has to think about his future and who has college bills up the wazoo. They don't want those people voting, because if they vote, they're going to vote against the interests of Wall Street. They're going to vote against perpetual war for perpetual peace that we're living under now. That's the object. They don't want these people voting.
Which speaks to, do you believe that we have a democracy?
Okay, well, we're going to have to close it right there. I want to thank Dennis Burnside for joining me and Doug Warren for joining me. Catch us again next time on Street Talk. My name is Ammahad Shekarakki. Peace.
Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine, messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, "You're too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God."